Welcome to Off Panel. Welcome to Off Panel. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guest is the writer of comics like Sex Criminals, Casanova, Solid State, and more. It's Matt Fraction. Thanks for coming on.
Shit, piss, fuck, cunt, cocksucker, motherfucker, and tits.
There's the explicit already, right off the bat. We're done. We're done.
He specifically said, don't be George Carlin. I had to do it. I had to.
I challenged you. I've made a huge mistake.
And I just, the other day I was driving in my car, literally just singing those words and like made up a whole rhythm, and I had a whole thing to it, and it was great. I had a whole 4-part harmony with myself. It was awesome.
That is amazing. That sentence you just dropped of pure curse words reminds me of my dad, because he is like adamantly against cursing. I remember when I was a kid, we were watching The Usual Suspects, which is totally appropriate for children. And he walked in and he was so infuriated by it because of all the cussing that he like literally pulled the DVD out and then hid it, and we could never watch it again. But the funny thing is the only time he would cuss, there would be these, it's like it would come out of nowhere, and it would be a flurry of 15 seconds straight of pure curse words that made no sense together. And it was amazing. What
was the line? The dad in A Christmas Story could weave a tapestry of obscenity that's still intact over Central Ohio or something like that.
That is, I don't remember that line, but that is precisely my dad. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, you used to be able to tell how angry my grandfather was by the pause in between the words God and damn it. Like, the longer the pause, the madder he was.
Did you guys have like an actual scale, or was it mostly just feel-based?
It was sort of like, you would kind of feel the beats, you know, like, ooh, he's mad. That was 3. That's bad, man. Huh?
That is amazing.
I can't. I'm losing it the further away I get from him. But
it is kind of funny how you can figure out these little things about people. There's I watch Formula One racing, and there's this one announcer who says "my oh my" a lot, or no, boy oh boy. And sometimes when he's really, really thrown off by something, he'll say boy oh boy oh boy oh boy, and you're just like, how many oh boy? Like every time he adds an oh boy, you know it's like an increasing disaster. It's pretty amazing.
Wow.
Language is a fantastic thing.
But literally giving me a reason to watch Formula One. Watch this guy freak out.
So I wanted to start at the beginning for you before diving into Sex Criminals, because one of my greatest fascinations in comics is the Warren Ellis Forums. I talked to Chip about the Warren Ellis Forums. I've talked to Kieran Gillen about the Warren Ellis Forums. It's my ultimate goal to write an oral history of the Warren Ellis Forums. But for those who don't know, it's a place.
That's a weird goal.
My writing goal. I think it's a fun thing to dive into. I write a lot of long form stories, and I feel like there's a story there. But I know you met Kelly Sue there, and plenty of other Future Comics folk came there from there, like Kieran Gillen and Jamie McKelvey and Charlie Chu. Besides literally turning you into Matt Fraction, what kind of impact do you think those forums had on your perspective and approach as a comic book creator?
Well, I came to comics as a hobby, as something to do, so I didn't have a client. Mm-hmm. I worked in advertising, I worked in animation, and comics, writing about comics, making my own comics, whether or not anybody ever saw them or not, was just a thing that I did because it's what you do when you kind of can't have a regular job, Mm-hmm. If I was a musician, after working, at the Muzak factory all day, I'd come home and play guitar or whatever. It just was sort of a thing I did. So my entry into it was a lot like art school, where I just sort of thought that you played show and tell a lot. I had no problem addressing people as peers. People who really honestly had no right to, certainly no professional right to address as peers. But I had no problem introducing myself to Warren. I had no problem jumping into conversations with people, in the same way that I would have in art school or whatever. Mm-hmm. But I learned quickly that some people are cool with that, and some people want you to kiss the ring.
Right.
So that was interesting. That sort of like, oh, there's a status thing here. You're not allowed to just the thing. I mean, I think the entire reason, Warren tolerated my existence was it made him laugh.
Mm-hmm.
And like, that was sort of the takeaway. Like, if you're smart and funny, this is a great place to be.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you're smart and or funny. If you're smart and funny, fuck, dude, it's great. Like, are some of the smartest people I've ever met were I've met through there, beyond comics, outside of the world of comics. So I learned, I wasn't shy. I sort of got over any of that, because if you address people as peers, there's a sort of, hey, we're all interested in the same thing. Let's talk. Let me ask you a question. What about this? What about that? Like, I just kind of dumbassed my way into it and behaved as though we were all at a big party, and I wouldn't feel like I needed to literally bend to the knee and kiss someone's ring at a party, so I'm not going to fucking do it in a forum or whatever. So that was cool. Like, sort of that, just to see my first real experience outside of conventions with the way prose behaved to underclassmen.
Right.
Like, there's a lot of lessons there, and a lot of sort of things that I remember seeing and thinking, like, that's a, I saw a lot of bad looks. I saw a lot of good looks too.
Mm-hmm.
So that was that. And I mean, the impact, I mean, there's an entire generation of creators that came from there.
Yeah.
It's me and Kieran and Jamie and Kel and Brian Lee O'Malley. And I mean, there's 30 I'm forgetting, like, there was a wave that had already been moving that kind of gained momentum there. And then there was sort of us, the wave that came after that. And I think that we all it's like we all broke out of the same lab.
Right.
And maybe we all got to wherever we were going different, in different ways. But at one point we were all in the same rabbit warren together.
Yeah. I do think what you said about, like, the whole kissing the ring thing, I think that's one thing that's really interesting about, it's not just comics, it's everything. You have to get over, like, putting people on a pedestal in general, but it's something that I think of people, like, I've been writing about comics for like 8 years in some capacity, started small, have gotten up to bigger places and things of that sort. But one thing that I always tell people who ask me about doing it is, like, you have to act like creators are people. And, like, once you start actually having people relationships with all these people, that's when it gets fun, and that's when it gets a lot easier. And it sounds like that was a good way to kind of get over that right off the bat.
Yeah. And just what I remember most, and like, I've met, like, I don't want to diminish its importance. I don't mean to sound like that, but like, it's not like I couldn't tell you a single thing that was written or said there, I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
No, wait, I can tell you one thing that still makes me laugh when I think about it. But what I remember was just, it was so fucking funny.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's what I remember. I remember laughing so goddamn much, and just like, that's my recall.
Yeah.
I remember just going on and laughing, whether I was the butt of the joke or a part of it or just watching it happen.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I remember. I remember it being really funny.
Well, that's one of the things I love about comics, and in, like, forums in general also can be like this, but I think comics at their best form a community, and, to transition from Warren Ellis Forums into Sex Criminals, I think the fact that you guys have a community that supports it in the Brimpers is really amazing. And I talked to Chip about this before. One of the things I thought was amazing is that he said you guys didn't actually plan to, like, have a letters column, and that basically the Brimpers willed themselves into existence. Is that how it went?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I don't know how you could have planned.
Right.
Listen, if I could have planned it, I'd have done it when I wrote Fear Itself or whatever. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, if this is just, what we should do is we should write a book that's hugely popular. It wasn't like that was in the DNA. It was a byproduct of, we were it was kind of catching lightning in a bottle. The Brimpers, not only did they will themselves into existence, they self-organized.
Yeah.
We just coasted on the hard work of many lovely, wonderful people. You're wonderful. You're great. Thank you. Thank you for everything you've done for us.
I remember I went to a New York Comic Con where like the Brimpers just had like a get together, and I think you and Chip ended up going to it. Or maybe it's just Chip, but I mean, I just think that's amazing. They're just having these independent meetups. It's such a, I don't know. I've always been really impressed by the Brimpers. You guys are great too, but the Brimpers are just kind of amazing.
Was it the one at Mustang Sally's?
I didn't go. I just remember hearing about it, and I was just like, why did I not? I think we were throwing a party with, I used to be with this site called Multiversity Comics, and we threw a party with Image. So I think I went to that instead. And either way,
that was our first New York Comic Con, and it was we were supposed to only take up the back room of the bar. We filled the entire joint, and they stayed up past closing time. It was amazing.
That is amazing.
There was like 300 people in this bar. It was nuts. That entire year, and Chip and I still talk about this, is like full of stuff like we're gonna think about when we die. Like I got recognized on the street, right?
Yeah.
Like that's not like, and it's one thing to be like, oh, it's a comic convention, but like we were in the garment district at 3 a.m. Like it was weird, and like that whole year was full of like, oh, this is gonna flash before my eyes, and this part will flash before. We were at a. You talk about it. It sounds like let me tell you another story about how massively popular. I don't mean it like that, but just it's so beyond. I mean, look, I wrote for Marvel, and I wrote everything pretty much. I touched everything I wanted to touch in some capacity, right? Like I had the experience of being the guy writing X-Men and all that crazy stuff, and this surpassed all of it, and continues to. Mm-hmm. The stuff that I can't talk about right now will melt your face off.
You mean for sex criminals or in general?
With sex criminals.
Right. I do think that the amazing thing is I'm curious as to why it happened, because I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that it's about sex, and the fact that everybody kind of has a different relationship with it. Like there was the character who's asexual, and like people had a different response to that. Or the fact that everybody has found porn in the woods. I have found porn in the woods, and it's just this amazing.
You live in Alaska. I bet you've actually found like porn sets in the woods.
Oh yeah, I mean, we just hide it for like we have like little nooks we hide during the winter, and then when everything melts, we can go and pick it up again. It's perfect.
I tell this every time it comes up. David S. Goyer has the greatest porn in the woods story I have ever heard. It is an epic. It has like structure and like themes.
That's amazing.
And his porn in the woods story is so fantastic. It makes me crazy. Like if it wasn't so insanely stupid, I would be convinced that like, no, you just wrote that to tell people. But like, no, there's no way anyone could come up with such an amazing, stupid and wonderful, glorious story like that. There's no one is that good of a writer. I don't care what you rate.
I just want to know who's hiding the porn in the woods. Is it people are accidentally leaving it, or is it just like this is people's stash and they're keeping it out there?
I think it's like spraying it forward. I think it's take a porno, leave a porno.
Yeah, it's like the lending libraries people have.
Yeah, exactly. Sort of where we went in the book. I think I have a couple theories. One of them is that I think it's funny, and I don't mean like comics funny.
Right.
It's really hard to be funny. We work at it. There's craft, and it's not. Comics funny tends to be like, hey, what's a Scooby-Doo reference, right? That's not actual jokes. Mm-hmm. Referring to other things you enjoy and being like, get it? That's not really a joke. Like, so I think it's funny, which people enjoy kind of regardless of genre, right? Mm-hmm. Humor transcends genre. I think as you said, it's this thing that everyone has to figure out for themselves. Regardless of where you end up on the sexual spectrum today, you had to figure it out.
Right.
And the chances are you might have to figure it all out again tomorrow, right? So I think that connects people again in a way that transcends like genre interests or You know, I like these kinds of stories, like that kind of story. Like that's the thing everybody has in common.
Mm-hmm. It's a universality to it that very few stories have.
Right. I think that's part of it too. I think that it is dirty but not sexy is appealing to people who find that sort of thing appealing.
Mm-hmm.
Like the people that listen to Loveline or read Savage Love.
Right.
It's not like because of prurient interest, you know. You're not reading Savage Love because you couldn't find this month's issue of Penthouse Forum or whatever. Penthouse Forum, kids, that was a magazine. Literally just the letters that alleged readers would write into Penthouse. Dear Penthouse, you're never going to believe this. I was closing up the 7-Eleven at 3 a.m. when all of a sudden the Swedish girls skiing team stopped in to tank up. It's like literally just letters like that. Anyway, they would collect those letters and publish them in a special digest form called Penthouse Forum. I have to explain to people what things were like, you know, before the internet.
Of course. I remember that. I was a little too young for that, like to purchase it. But at the same time, I was aware of its existence in a porn in the woods type situation, which would be a very disappointing find if you were a child finding porn in the woods. But
though I had a friend and that was his preferred beat jam, man. That would have been a 5-star jackpot for him.
Yeah, but you know that's I think the amazing thing about Letter Daddies is like that guy. If let's say he read Letter Daddies and he found that somebody else out there shared his kink in Penthouse Forum, and it's like then you find your community. You find that there are other people out there like you, and I think that's where a lot of the power comes from. Is people find commonality and they feel like that they're not the only person who's like that anymore.
I think that is what. Yeah, I think that's it. I think. It's a thing that if you're interested in it, it's for you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a friend who I suspect is mortified and scandalized somewhat by the book. And I know he knows it exists. I don't know that he's read much of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. It's not his thing.
Right.
I know like of his relationships, but that is about it. He has had relationships. I know that much. He's not the kind of guy that is not a part of, hey, what'd you do last night? He shares with anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And he, in fact, gets quite flustered and embarrassed when people do share it. So it's like, you know what? This is not going to be your cup of tea, man.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fine. That's the market. Some people don't read Savage Love because like, ew, gross, or don't want to listen to Loveline or whatever the hell. And I'm like, but for those that do.
I wanted to ask, you know, I've established that I'm a big fan of Letter Daddies, but I wanted to ask about your back matter in general because the back of 4G had a fake oral history of the White Wiener song by Alex Papadopoulos. Did Alex Papadopoulos actually write that?
No. I just made all of it up.
Oh, okay. I totally thought that was real. I mean, he wrote for
Alex.
Grant.
I know and adore Alex, and have spoken with him for publication numerous occasions. And we just decided like, nope, we're going to go all in and just make this look as genuine and real as possible. Because it's the kind of terrible story he would be saddled with having to write for some magazine, you know?
Yeah, no, I think I used to, when he wrote for Grantland, I read his stuff a lot, and he's great, but it was funny because I was reading it like just last night because I hadn't read that part. I have it in single issues, but I hadn't read that yet. And I was like, I knew a lot of the stuff was fake. But I didn't know if Alex Papadopoulos actually wrote the intro, and it was really weird to put that together.
Right. No, and like that was the thing. Like Shaybon had nothing to do with it. Gene had nothing to do with it. But it's like these are all people either who will never see this, or who I can apologize to personally. Like that was the line. Like who can I personally say sorry to, and who will just never gonna fucking see it.
So how do you decide that you want to put something like that in? Is it just like this sounds fun, or is it like you want to add value, or what is it?
Well, I mean, yes, and there's the raw thing. Like you know, one of the things about our book, there's one of the many differences between work for hire comics and kind of an original comics is that we're not beholden to certain format structures like duration.
Right.
Our books are often other lengths than 20 pages.
Mm-hmm.
The issues were long. The issue, and it happens again in the next arc. The issues change size. So mathematically, you have to print in multiples of 8.
Mm-hmm.
So depending on where you end with the stuff you have to have, covers and credits, et cetera, you're going to have extra pages.
Mm.
So the fact of the matter was, when we put all the stuff in that we had, we're like, oh, hey, look, we got like 6 pages open. What are we going to do? I was like, all right, I got it. I'm going to do the oral history. Because I saw some oral history article on some website that was the stupidest thing. It was like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever read. Of course I devoured it.
I was going to say, I really hope I didn't write it.
No. But like, it's just, this is so stupid. I can't believe it. I have to make fun of it, like, because I think oral histories is like, I'm out of time. I can't write a thing, but I can send emails. Right.
Yeah.
Like, it's become, there was a time when I quite enjoyed them, and now it sort of feels like, oh, you just didn't have anything to say about, whatever.
Sure.
So I was like, all right, so we're gonna just make an oral history about
the White Wiener Song.
White Wiener Song is the most important thing in the world, and then in between finishing it and publication, I have read an even dumber oral history that I think renders us obsolete.
Oh, the White Wiener Song had a great run at it.
It was a glorious,
multiple days.
Yeah, moments.
I do want to
dozens of moments.
I do want to say that I really appreciate how in your writing, this is evident in Sex Criminals, that you don't seem like you fear embracing taking a sides. Like, a lot of people, if they approach Sex Criminals, would just keep it about Susie and John. But you had like the Myrtle Spurge centric issue of Sex Criminals, which I thought was fantastic. How much of like the way you approach a series like this one is like you following your gut and just kind of going with what feels right?
Oh, it's all following your gut. It's all following my gut anyway.
Right.
But
probably not mine.
Part of what, like, I think you can see in the first arc, I think you can see the story sag because we hadn't been planning on it lasting more than 4 issues.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can see us like, whoa, we're going to be able to keep doing this? And trying to recalibrate how we're going to get to where our end is. Part of that realization was realizing why we were going to be allowed to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
What people were responding to, and not like, hey, this is what you like, we're going to give you more of it. But like, people aren't reading this because they want to read about a bank getting robbed.
Right.
There are other comics about that. People are writing this book because it's about people. Like, okay, people, that we can do.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's just sort of intuiting, what if this, what if that,
mm-hmm.
and feeling it out.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic seeing that. And I also think that one of the amazing things is despite, you are following your gut, but I was reading this interview where you were talking about how you don't like throwing people into tall grass right away. Like, you want to make sure that like the established readers won't get bored with what you do, but you also make it friendly for new readers. And that's such a fine line. It's such a tricky thing with comics because it's a tough nut to crack for a lot of writers. How difficult is that? An incredibly tough balance to have as a writer. It seems like it's a struggle for everyone. It's understandable.
I mean, with work for hire stuff, it's like you have to. I had to sort of decide, like, hey, listen, some people on the internet are never going to like it. Every character is somebody's favorite character, and you're doing it wrong. And every character is someone somewhere is going to have written that Wikipedia article, and it doesn't matter how much I enjoy the character, you can't beat Wikipedia Brown.
Mm-hmm.
So like letting that go,
right? Like,
I'm not going to be everybody's friend. I don't have to prove my bona fides on hey, it's okay. There's stuff in the Marvel books that I wrote that is so inside baseball, like continuity, that like only Tom Brevoort ever caught it.
Right.
And like Tom Brevoort is the guy who holds the entirety of the Marvel universe in his head at all times.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like, all right, once I let go of feeling compelled to prove my nerd cred, then that freed me of having to prove anything, and then just kind of became about writing a good story.
Right.
And sort of, and I've said it before, but like continuity is the devil.
Mm-hmm.
Consistency should be the master, you know. Continuity keeps people out. It makes continuity is telling stories about the past. Right. And being hamstrung, and continuity is bad. Continuity is very bad. Consistency, that's the important thing. And if you can commit to, if you know your continuity, but like, look, hey, Kunlun was populated initially by giant broccoli people, and the entire city was surrounded by sort of broccoli asparagus warriors that every now and again Iron Fist would fight. Right? Yeah. That's dumb. It's bad writing. It's a bad idea. It's just silly. You know? Hey, I've had a lot of bad, silly ideas too. You take a swing. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. Ed and I never talked about it.
Right.
Ever.
Is that a real thing? I honestly don't know.
I'm not making that up. Fucking Google it.
Oh my God.
Yeah. We just never talked about it. So we never said no, but just like, hey, you know what is awesome about Iron Fist is Kung Fu Billionaire. Let's write Kung Fu Billionaire and let someone else worry about the state of the broccoli people, because that's not Kung Fu Billionaire. Anything that takes away from Kung Fu Billionaire is taking away from Kung Fu Billionaire. So like at Marvel, at least in my experience, stuff where like if I can nod to it, great. If you can Tom Brevoort it and read it and get it, that's also great. But if you don't, like I met a dude swearing up and down, he's like the world's biggest Hawkeye fan, and and never knew about the deaf thing. I'm like, sweet. Great. There's some good comics out there for you to still read. I don't doubt your love and your desire and your entertainment and enjoyment, and I don't doubt any of that. But man, you got some digging to do.
Yeah, I mean it's impossible for non Tom Brevoort people to really keep that all in their head. I mean, I grew up a huge X-Men fan, but some of my favorite storylines, I try to recount them now, and I still don't remember them. And I don't know. It's a really fascinating question about continuity versus consistency. It's not actually really a question. It's just like I think that sometimes comics get too beholden on that, and they like creators I was talking about earlier, they hold it on too high of a pedestal, and it kind of takes away from the story.
Yep. It makes you writing comics about older comics, and that is not writing.
Yeah.
That is published fan fiction. Even then, fan fiction is more fearless than that.
Yeah, a lot of it sounds to be, from what I've heard, but I'm curious, you talked about how you kind of got over the fear, writing like for hire comics, but I am curious about the kind of pressure you put on yourself writing like creator-owned script versus for hire, because I was reading the piece that Micah Peters wrote about you for The Ringer, and he talked about how you took 30 hours to write 2 pages in issue number 20. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you've gotten over that kind of, that you just kind of have to get over like the paralyzing fear of scripts and the pressure you put on yourself in for hire, because the schedule is punishing. But for Sex Criminals, do you still feel that pressure? Is that still on you? Constantly. The worst day of the Sex Criminals production cycle is when I have to open up the mailbox. Like I open it up once. I literally open it up the night before the book goes to print. And I'm always convinced this is the night it all the wheels just come off. Mm-hmm. No, it never goes away. It transmutes. It's like trying to catch mercury. Right. I will always find things to blame and hate myself for. It's never easy. I'm constantly in the process of finding new ways to hate what I do. The worst day in comics is Wednesday, because it's the day the comics come out and all your mistakes get made permanent. Mm-hmm. The best comic I wrote is the one I just finished, and the worst one I wrote is the one that just came out. Every time it's the same fucking answer. Mm-hmm. It's paralyzing. It's unhealthy. It's the reality of stuff. Like, I'm in the process of moving, and I moved a bunch of boxes over the weekend.
and realized how much I was enjoying it because it was a job that doesn't have a comment section at the end.
Yes.
Like, hey, you know what? I'm going to pick up this big heavy thing. I'm going to move it to that place. And then I'm going to repeat it about 500 times. Like there's joy in that. Like, this is great. This is not a subjective task at all. It is purely objective. But no, man, what I learned, or rather, at least what I had to learn, was that if I wasn't willing to eat it, like if I wasn't willing to fall on my face, I was never going to publish.
Right.
So it's the Ed Wood gag of my next one will be better. There's a scene in the Tim Burton movie where he's trying to sweet talk his way onto a studio lot to pitch a movie. And he's like, this is Edward D. Wood Jr., director of Glenna Glenda. And the guy's like, that's the worst piece of shit I ever seen. And he's like, oh, my next movie will be better, which is why I'm here. It's called Dr. Acula, or whatever it was. Like, that was, oh, that's how you write. Just do better next time.
Mm-hmm. I think it's really interesting. Like, there's a very unique feeling to that kind of thing because, you know, not to make this about myself, but I wrote in February. I've always dreamed of writing for a Bill Simmons associated site because he was the reason why I wanted to write. And I wrote a piece for The Ringer in February about 25 years of Image, which I researched for like 3 months. And it was this massive piece I put together. Yeah. And I was like, the morning it was released, it was like sheer terror. And I couldn't explain it to people. It was like I was at work and I just had to keep acting like this was a normal day. But every time somebody like said anything about it, it was just like I was mortified. I thought this was going to be the one where somebody's going to tell me it was terrible. And it's a really fascinating emotional state. Like I don't think a lot of people understand it because I don't know. Like I recently went through a moving the boxes experience myself, and it's like it's so much more tranquil than having to deal with actual people's responses, I guess. Yeah. No, listen, it's way easier to isolate than to deal with humans. Yeah.
What's the Henry Rollins line? Humans are mean and dangerous. Avoid them as much as possible.
I did want to bring up, I read in another interview that you said you were happier writing issue number 24 of Sex Criminals than you had been for, you know, writing anything in a long time, which I think is great. But how much does your feelings and like the, how you feel you're doing with the book change arc to arc and issue to issue? Do you feel like you're just at a better place right now with Sex Criminals, or is it just really feel based?
That was sort of content wise, not had nothing to do with the execution at all. I mean, my goal is like to make Chip laugh. That's it. And once everything else is gravy, but without kind of getting too into, you know, if you've read 4G, you know where the book ends. Like John and Susie break up, and it kind of puts this book that's purported to be a love story in like a really fascinating place for the next arc. Like, hey, our leads aren't together anymore.
Right.
And when we come back, it's 6 months later. So we get to see what they're like 6 months away from one another. And it was just that. It was that sort of like exploring that, pushing that story as far as I could, and finding. Yeah, I don't know. It was fun. It was a fun issue to write. I don't think it's any good, but I enjoyed writing it.
Yeah. So content-wise, it was more what you're referring to.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to ask about, you know, one of the things that I don't think a lot of people really think about is the fact that it's, you know, you're writing it and Chip is doing everything art-wise. He's line art, color art, lettering, doing everything. In 4G, in issue number 17, you had the incredible Elizabeth Breitweiser, who I'm a super fanboy of. She is unbelievable. Step in for like the criminal homage, and I'm kind of curious. Like you and Chip probably had your set routine and everything. How was that jarring at all to introduce somebody into your guys' world?
Oh yeah. Well, it would have been more jarring if it hadn't been. I mean, like I even wrote like I changed the format of the script. I wrote in Ed's format, which is very different than mine.
Yeah.
But like, you know, I used to speak pretty fluent Brubaker, so it was like method writing. Like literally the font changed, the size, like I wrote that entire sequence the way Ed writes his scripts.
That's amazing.
And like, if you notice, like the grid goes away. So like, it was, and two, Chip is kind of not emulating Sean, but he's kind of emulating Sean, of whom he is a huge fan. And in fact, the art piece of Sean's, like, Chip actually owns that original. That's how we were able to run that, is Chip owns it.
That's amazing.
So, like it was just the biggest love letter to these guys that we just love so much.
You mean the Sex Criminals page with Myrtle Spurge's face taped over it?
Yeah, Chip owns the actual Sean Phillips painting underneath that.
That is amazing.
But yeah, so it was. But once we realized like how far we're going to go, Chip was like, "Oh, we should see if we can get Betty to color it." I'm like, "Oh, it's so good." And like it was a secret to the guys. They didn't know until it came out.
Mm-hmm. That is so great. I mean, I did notice that Chip's stuff changed a little bit. It seems like a little heavier on the inks than usual.
Yeah.
And it really he evokes Sean in like a really, like, it's still Chip, but it feels a little bit more like Sean.
Yeah. Also, I believe those were actually physically drawn.
Oh, like traditional instead of digital?
Yeah, whereas Sex Criminals is done digitally. I believe he actually physically crafted those pages.
That's amazing.
So like it was like an exercise in method comicking right down the line.
Mm-hmm. A good thing you worked with Ed in the past with Iron Fist, because then you had the Ed voice in your head.
Yeah, but it's not gone but not forgotten.
There you go. I want to talk about collaboration, because one of the things that I really like about Sex Criminals and your work as a whole is it feels like there's this one thing that Kieran Gillen wrote about once about him and Jimmy McKelvey working together, and he described them like reviewers should refer to them as like a faux cartoonist, because like they are kind of like a Voltron's like cartoonist basically. How important for you is it to collaborate with people who are going to like push back and have their own voice to help drive the work to its fullest potential?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, I don't want employees. I want collaborators. I want co-conspirators. I've been really fortunate in that 98% of the stuff I've written, I knew who I was writing for before I wrote it, and wrote it for them explicitly. And I wrote it because I wanted to write for them. Like that's a great place to be.
Yeah. Like
to be like, all right, so I get to work. It's my second script at Marvel, and Mike Diodato is drawing it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, all right, what do I love about Mike's work, and how can I, like it becomes an attempt at trying to write the best script I can for Diodato, for Chip, for David Aja, for Christian Ward, for Howard Chaykin, for whomever at any. And it's like, I'm trying to, as a fan, write a love letter to these people to show them what I see as like the ultimate them comic in my head, and then encourage them to throw it all out and do their own thing, because they're going to know better, and I'm just going to take credit for it all anyway.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because I wrote this piece about like there was like this artist credit thing that was going on where there was a lot of people unhappy, and I just wanted to talk about how a lot of books are made by, there is like the assembly line thing is out there, but a lot of books, even Marvel books, are made by creative teams. And I had David Aja write or share exactly how you guys did Hawkeye, and it was amazing. And he said it'd be hard to say exactly who came up with individual ideas because of how you worked, and that's why Hawkeye was credited to by Matt Fraction and David Aja. And so
and listen, so is Sex Criminals.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we credit David Aja with everything in Sex Criminals. Chip would be nothing without David. But yeah, no, it's and look, Odyssey was the same way, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
I might be wrong about that. It should have been.
Well, I actually think that was one thing I was looking at is, so you've worked with like, Gabriel Bond, Fabio Moon, and you've worked with Chip. Those guys, all of those are accomplished writers in their own right. And then you've worked with like something like Christian Ward is just like an amazing storyteller visually. And I do think it's really cool how you work with these people, and most, like, those are all creator-owned books, so it's probably by choice, or definitely by choice, that have these strong voices of their own. I love that, and I think it really shows in the work.
Thanks.
Yeah. I do want to tout Casanova for a second, because I've been reading comics since I was like 8. And for some reason, I think like subconsciously I always realized this, but for some reason I didn't really realize how panels worked until I read an issue of Casanova, and like you guys really explicitly used like panels for the passage of time, and it was like the way that you and I think it was Gary Burrell on that one, the way that you guys did that just like it like unlocked something in my brain as to how I understand comics. It was really fascinating.
Huh. It's that book is the perfect workshop for me. Like, that's maybe the best advice I could give anybody, is when you write a comic, write the comic you want to read. Don't write the comic you think people will buy. Mm-hmm. And like it's like my laboratory. I get to figure out. And it's funny. I can see where if you I think if you were crazy, you could go through and I mean, there's also stuff that's difficult, like just when things are written and when they're published is so wildly different. But like you can see me learn stuff in Casanova and then take it out into the world in a more palatable fashion. Like you can see I could draw a straight line from Casanova to Hawkeye. I don't know anybody else could see it, but I can tell everything that all this stuff that I did in Casanova, like I learned how to do by doing Casanova. And like, that's invaluable. Like to have that space to breathe and to learn and to fail and to grow, and be allowed to, because it's not Batman. It doesn't have to sell 100,000 copies a month or whatever.
Yeah. It's kind of like your laboratory.
Yeah. And, you know, and too, I've been working on it with Bon Moon for 10 years now, going on 11 years now. Shit. And that's 11 years we've learned together. And now we sort of speak a language, the three of us. It's no one else speaks. Mm-hmm.
I also love that you had a cartoonist doing the lettering too, which like, I love Dustin Harbin, and like his lettering in that, I just like, it's hard to say exactly why I love it so much, but it just has such a personality that fits that book so well. It's just, I love it.
It's because it's real.
Yeah. Yeah. Does he hand letter that?
Yeah.
That's wild. And
look, Ba uses a pen and Fabio uses a brush, and it's analog, man. It's vinyl, you know. Mm-hmm. It's there's warmth and chaos in it, that you lose with perfect, clear letter forms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I'm gonna take a huge change of pace. I want to actually ask about like managing workload, because you have a lot of stuff going on. You know, you're writing comics, you're actively working on TV projects. I'm curious, like, how do you balance all that out, and how important is like having a team? Like, you know, you have Milkfed Criminal Masterminds, which is your company with Kelly Sue, and you work with like Lauren Sankovic and Kit Cox, and et cetera, et cetera. How important is that for keeping you sane and keeping you going in the right direction?
Oh, super important. And it's sort of like we adore Kit and Lauren, and they're terrific at their jobs, and we pay them very well, so we don't have to do them. Like we pay for the privilege to be allowed to stay at our desks and do the stuff we got to do. Mm-hmm. And even if that's like be with our kids, it's like, hey, you can do a proofreading pass on this, or you can go pick your kid up from school. You know, it's kind of a lifestyle decision.
Yeah.
We'd surely have more money, but we'd be less happy if we didn't have them doing the stuff that they do, because they make it possible for us to write. They make it possible for us to be alive, mm-hmm. in the way we wish to be.
Yeah, that is fantastic. It's probably also pretty nice. I don't know how you work exactly, but I mean, is it nice to have, you know, Kit and Lauren and like Kelly Sue to turn to if you are stuck on something, and have somebody to bounce ideas off of in person?
I don't really work like that.
Okay.
You know, it's nice because I can isolate, I can get low, you know, I can hole up. At the same time, there are days where I'd kill for peace and quiet. Mm-hmm. But no, it's, you know, I've run away and joined the circus. It's great.
So I just have a few more questions. I wanted to talk about Solid State because I love that book. I told you that before we started recording. It's a graphic novel you did with Jonathan Colton and Albert Montes. Is it Albert Montes? Is that how you pronounce it?
I believe so.
Yeah. So I couldn't help but think that might have been like a uniquely challenging project because for listeners who don't know, you're adapting an album by Jonathan Colton into comic form. Was that like what kind of challenges did that present you as a writer?
Well, I have likened it to writing the book for a musical. Mm-hmm. Jonathan came to me with the record and was like, "Hey, I think I wrote a concept album, but I forgot to deal with the concept, and I could have a place where we could grow it." And I was thinking, well, maybe a graphic novel. And that was kind of the start of it. And I had sort of like fallen in love with Hamilton around that time, and was kind of looking at musicals for the first time in my life and sort of looking at how they work and trying to figure out how they work. And it occurred to me like, oh, this is probably as close to working on a musical as I've ever come. So yeah, just as a creative challenge, let's give it a shot. And I knew Albert's work from Universe. Mm-hmm. On Panel Syndicate, and he was able to work on it, and it was like Jonathan loved it and I loved him, and it was just right gig, right time, right kind of challenge, and yeah, I mean, anything to not be bored, you know?
Yeah, well, I imagine that was definitely not a boring project. Just looking through it, it just has so much life to it. I am kind of curious though, because Albert himself is a cartoonist with years and years and years of history. Like how do you approach a script like that? You never worked with him before. Did you guys kind of talk it out first, or how did you guys get that together?
No, I figured out the grid. I sort of figured out the shape of it, mm-hmm. and just looked at Universe and tried to write for him. Right. I don't know. It's however you hear music, Mm-hmm. How did you know this part was for cellos? I don't know. It just felt like cellos, I loved his work. And David introduced me to him as like, this is the guy all of us Spaniards wish we were. Like, that's pretty high praise,
I think Marcos Martin told me the same thing. I mean, I think he's just incredibly respected and beloved in the Spanish art community.
Yeah. Yeah. And the chance to maybe get him exposure over here was too good to ignore.
So for image books, for listeners that don't know this, it's like the amazing thing about image books is you get it's your baby. You get all the rights, you get all this stuff like that, but it also comes down to you have to make choices about paper and how you want to publish it and everything like that. Obviously, a thing that stands out about it is the fact it's square. And
right.
that's and I know was the reason for that you were trying to emulate kind of like the shape of a rectangle or of a record?
Well, I knew there was going to be a record.
Right.
And I don't know. It was because we could, It just felt like, oh, this is perfect. And Albert, it felt perfect for Albert somehow. I don't know. I don't know. It was an intuitive. You put something down and see how it strikes you, and maybe it makes it all the way through at the end. And that was one of the things that, like, oh, it's a square.
Yeah,
I got it. There's also a like lyrically some significance to the it was sort of it felt right. It was an intuitive, creative thing that there's the song "Square Things" on the album, mm-hmm. So it sort of felt like. There's a couple references to stuff. It's the size of the record. It's not a comic book in the way that you can read it without the record. With the record, it's a different experience. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It was a guess.
Yeah, the actual thing I was going to get to eventually was this is going to be the weirdest part of the podcast. Did you pick the paper?
Yeah.
It smells so good. Is that weird?
Good. No, it smells real good. I'll tell you what smells better. The first issue of Odyssey with the fold out is the best smelling comic I've ever been associated with.
I don't remember that. I don't remember the smell.
we had to use a special paper stock because of the size of the fold out.
Mm-hmm.
And it smelled so good. Christian and I almost printed the whole run on it, but we didn't, because it was a little pricey, all things considered. But anyway, if you can find yourself a copy of Odyssey #1 with the fold out, breathe deep, friends, because it's good smelling. But yeah, you're right. No, it smells amazing. The solid state book smells great.
Yeah, no, it's really funny. I was in bed reading it, and I just started sniffing the book, and I was like, "This smells so good." And I think my wife thought it was really weird.
Yeah, no, you should. That is very strange.
But no, I mean, that's one of the things I think is amazing about Image, and I've talked to I am kind of curious if like those types of decisions are something that really appeals to you about Image, is like going in and having to pick up paper stock and pick out exactly how you're going to do this, and like it not having to be 20 pages, it can be 32 pages, or it can be 40 pages. Like, is that something that specifically appeals to you about making books in Image?
Yeah, totally. And there was a book Matt Sheenan and Malachi Ward did called Ancestor.
Yeah.
It was on that stock. And there was the thing, is like I wanted something toothy and heavy, and like Marvel books are so like you can the light shines through the page. Like you can't, like it's so thin because it's so cheap, and like, all right, okay, so we're gonna make $400 less or whatever. Like, I'm a bad businessman, but I make good product.
Right.
And I'm willing to make less to have a better book. I believe that there's a physical experience to buying a book, to reading a book. There's a scent experience. There's a tactile experience. There are books I own because I like the way the covers felt.
Mm-hmm.
That's weird, but I get it. And so, yeah, that's great. You can do all that stuff at Image. You know, I don't run ads. You know, I think like there's an ad in Sex Criminals because we were short a page, like sort of early on. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's stuff like that. Like I try not to run ads.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, great. I get to decide my paper. Hey, guess what? This issue is going to be 32 pages. This one's going to be like the book I'm doing with Terry Dodson right now, Adventure Man. The first issue is going to be like 70 pages.
Wow.
Maybe longer. I don't know. We'll see.
That's awesome.
It's going to be big, but you know, we can do that. We can figure out what it means and what it looks like and what it's going to cost, and you know, we can take the risk.
Mm-hmm. I imagine that kind of decision making can be paralyzing for some people. It's like, I know I've brought this up in the podcast before, but I interviewed Eric Stevenson at Emerald City a few years ago, and he said he's just like, creator owned isn't for everyone. Like some people just can't do it, and I think partially it's because people don't realize how much work goes into not making the comic part of it, like the whole of it.
Yeah. No. The good news is you're the boss. The bad news is you're the boss.
Right.
You know, I talk to people who are kind of getting the ball rolling. They're like, okay, so once they say, okay, what do I do? I'm like, ask when you're publishing, find out your deadline, and go. Mm-hmm. And then, like, I'm convinced there are some creators at Image that are still published because they just upload books. And I don't mean that necessarily as shitty as it sounds. I don't mean that as derisively as it sounds and snarky as it sounds, but I'm convinced, like, oh no, there are guys who just do the work.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you want to know how you get published? Do the work. Publish it. Put it up. Upload it. Hey, it's time to print stuff. What's there? All right, we're doing this thing.
Yeah, you're proving you can make comics by making comics.
Yeah, I think that is a big component. And it's right for some people, and it's not right for others.
Yeah. You know, I want to mention one more thing about, like, not specifically related to the paper stock, but I think that one thing I've kind of noticed in recent years is, like, my taste in books and comics have kind of changed, and like kind of the ones that I really want to buy physical copies of are the ones that offer something a little special. Like, you know, whether or not that's a backmatter like Letter Daddies or a fake oral history, or like I really like Paper Girls, the paper stock that they use for that. I think that's great. Yeah. And then like I really love Nobrow books. I don't know if you read anything by Nobrow.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, like Fantasy Sports and like Nightlights and all those just have such incredible production value that it's like it feels like a physical artifact that I want in my house. Yeah. And I think that's meaningful. And I kind of wonder if like that's kind of where comics are trending to a degree. It's like you have to make something that's a little bit more substantial.
Look, comic costs $4.
Mm-hmm.
You can put it on 20 translucent pages, put 8 ads in it, and forget about it, then crank another one out in 28 days. Or you can keep an eye on a longer term. I know at Milkfed we hurt ourselves. I know we hurt ourselves in the direct market by not forcing our stuff out regularly, but ultimately the books are the issues are going to sell what the issues sell. But I know we're going to get retailers books that will sell for years.
Mm-hmm.
Let me give you, instead of 5 books every 28 days, let me give you 5 books as best I can, and then a collection that will move for you forever.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's important.
I know a lot of retailers, and I know it's like, you look at like, Sex Criminals Volume 1. When did that come out? Like 3 years ago? Was that?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and you look at, I talked to retailers, and it's still in like their top 100 most sold trades of the year, and 3 years later. And
look, I just got the biggest, once outside of you get paid 90 days, and then there are 6-month accrual statements. I just got the biggest accrual statement for Sex Criminals that I have yet seen for a 6-month period where we barely published.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, man. It's like I like, if it's an amazing position to be in, and I wish we could come out more regularly, but if we came out more regularly, the books would be worse and they would not move the volume they move.
Right.
Period. End of discussion.
Yeah. I think sorry.
And that's no, it's like it's the thing that we constantly wrestle with. It's like, well, hey, we could get 4 people to draw it, 6 people to ink it, and I could just kind of cut it off here in the middle and pick it up again next month. Or we can take the time and figure it out and make a product that we feel like is going to earn the money you spend on it.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of just take it for granted that you're going to buy it because you bought the last one.
I remember reading, I think it was Jennifer de Guzman, after she was no longer an Image, I think she said something along the lines of that she had been asked multiple times by like readers, why don't they get a fill-in artist for Fiona Staples on Saga? And I was like, what? Like, because it would be a completely different comic then? Because she co-owns it?
Yeah, that's not Saga.
Yeah, it's not Saga at that point.
Then it'd be Batman. And look, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's not the choice. It's not the journey. It's not the place we are. It's not what we want to do. And it's not, if Sex Criminals wouldn't sell what it sold, it wouldn't have made the impact it made if Salvador LaRocca drew it.
Mm-hmm.
I worked for Salvador LaRocca longer than anybody else in comics. We put out more consecutive issues of Iron Man than anyone has ever put out. Like, it took me 2 years of not working with Salva for my Salva sense to stop tingling. But like Salva's a machine. Salva's like a great white shark. All he does is swim and eat and make baby Salvas and draw comics. But like, I would not write that book for him.
Mm-hmm.
And his talents are legion, but I that's not where I would point them. Like, you could use an apple as a tire. It wouldn't be great, but you could do it.
I don't know how I don't know how Salvador LaRocca keeps that schedule. He's unbelievable. He's a Terminator.
Yeah, that's what he is. He draws like T1000 just running.
It's amazing.
Yeah. He's a machine. And literally, it was 2 years before I stopped worrying about if I needed to get Salva pages.
You mean after you stopped working on Iron Man?
Yeah. I would just like wake up in the middle of the night like, shit, it's been like 2 weeks. I gotta get Salva pages. No, wait.
I think Kieran Gillen's getting that experience right now because he worked with him on Darth Vader, and now they're working on Star Wars together.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So the last question I want to ask about was, you're not on social media anymore, but you do have the Milkfed newsletter, and right. I wanted to ask about that because I love it. I have to say that Kelly Sue's recent write-up about efficiency both made me read Cal Newport's deep work and made me review how inefficient I am, because I am extremely inefficient. It's a really impactful newsletter. You guys, like, I think it's something that people genuinely care about. Why did you guys decide to do that? And what's the response been like to putting yourselves out there in such a way?
I mean, the response has been like sort of everything we do, and that it's some people love it with a capital L, and it's not for others. And like everything else, we do it badly. Like, it's a terrible sales. We never get it out when we're supposed to. We never use it for actual sales. We forget. Oh wait, last week this came out. That's terrible. That's not what you're supposed to be doing. But we wanted a way, you know, there were several people that had newsletters we quite enjoyed, and it felt like a way that we could connect directly with people that didn't expose them and us to all the things about social media or the internet that's run amok. Mm-hmm. It was a chance to kind of be a little more considered than 140 characters would allow. And also to kind of open up, like, you got to sign up for it. Like, you're volunteering. You're allowing us into your inbox. So we're going to feel like, hey, you know what? Here's a picture of our kid's birthday party. Mm-hmm. And if this isn't for you, you signed up, you know where to click to unsubscribe, right? Like, it was a chance to kind of grow everything that's good while trying to avoid the bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is really nice. I mean, it's you're able to say what you want without having to get all the negative that comes with it with social media, and you actually have enough room to say what you really feel. But I think it is one of the interesting things about the newsletters and how, like, a lot of comic creators are doing them these days, and like with many things, it seemingly started with Warren Ellis. But I think that's one of the interesting things about how, you know, with creator owned getting bigger and bigger is it seems like people are investing in personalities or people as much as they are in ideas than they did in the past. Like Sex Criminals, I'm not saying that it wouldn't be as big if it was like not exactly the way it is, but I think a lot of times, like, people connect with you guys in the letters column, and so they feel connected to you guys as people, and they want to stay with you.
Yeah, I think there's something to that. I mean, I think it's a dangerous slope.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's exactly it. You know, we write a newsletter for people who want to hang out.
Yeah.
And that's really what it is. Is like, what do we like about newsletters? I like newsletters where it's like Warren complaining about what he ate and how tired he is, and Jamal Bowie talking about this thing, or you know, like, what, you know, there's just here Kieran Gillen's going to post pictures of his little Warhammer miniatures. Like, that's, what do you like? Here's, like, it's that stuff. It's sort of, yeah, literally you're saying to someone, I like you and I would like to subscribe to your newsletter. It's okay. Well, here's the newsletter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had talked to David Brothers about doing like a regular feature in Image Plus about just like the other things that creators are into, and just right. Like, you know, talking to like Matt Wilson about how he is like this fitness like god. I don't understand how he does some of the stuff he does, and then like you know,
his wife.
that's how.
Yeah, no, they're both. They're the two of them are. It's amazing to see the Wilsons next to Gillen and McKelvey, who are like so white as to be see through, like just so like pasty and tired.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, Matt Wilson looks like he's just taken apart a very complicated piece of IKEA furniture and moved it all to a dump. And then colored 30 pages of comics, and now he's at a convention. Mm-hmm. It's great.
I do think that there's a lot of interesting like personalities out there, and it's like that stuff actually always makes me I don't know, it doesn't make me enjoy the work more, but it makes me appreciate the people more. So it makes me more invested in making sure I pre-order and do things like that. So it's kind of a fascinating thing.
To go full circle, I mean, that was the kind of takeaway from the Ellis Forum was Warren started it because he had a young kid and he lived in the south of England, and going to cons was really hard.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, here's a way that I can have all the good parts of a con and none of the bad ones, right? You can hang out and shoot the shit with people.
Mm-hmm.
And like, that's a big, you know, and after a while, you become more than, it changes the deal terms between producer and consumer.
Mm-hmm.
It blurs the lines. In some ways it gets rough, in some ways it's dangerous, but in some ways it's really special and it's really magical, and you lose stuff, but you gain stuff. Mm-hmm. And the stuff you gain, you can't buy.
Absolutely.
I don't know how else to put it. It sounds really dumb and weird, but
no, I understand. I think it makes total sense, but that bringing it full circle is perfect, because that is all I have for you, Matt. Thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me.
I am sorry that I swore so much.
Well, good news is it was only like a 10-second burst, so we're pretty good.
All right.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with writer Matt Fraction. You can find his work in comics like Sex Criminals, Solid State, Odyssey, Casanova, and more. If you're a fan of the show, there's some big news. Off Panel now has a Patreon. If you like the show and want to support it, consider backing it on Patreon at patreon.com/offpanel. There are fun rewards and insider information you can get if you do. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including Henning Allers, Bruno Batista, Abraham Reisman, Adrian Diaz, Bobby Angus, Bjorn Basin, Darren Neely, John Hendrick, Steve Anderson, Michael Perlman, Bill Knoll, Ian Maxfield, Cliff Chang, Benjamin Shipper, Colin McMahon, Chris Palmer, Maxwell Schmidt, Dan Lee, Scott McGovern, Nathan Fairbairn, Kat McKenzie, Lou Iovino, Christopher Carter, Nicholas Keslick, Brian Dickerson, Greg Rucka, Ryan Mayle, Adam Highfill, Nicholas Gardner, Andrew Corrigan, Fiona Staples, Chris Morris, Johan Borander, Chris O'Halloran, Mark Abnett, Matt Battaglia, Mike Murphy, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim DiMonacos, Norbert, Nick Lowe, James Kaplan, and Mission Comics and Art in San Francisco. You guys are all the best. Don't forget to like the show on Facebook at /sketched. That's SKTCHD. Follow on Twitter at @sketchcomic, or follow me at @slicefriedgold. Want more from Off Panel? Subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher and give the show a rating or review while you're at it. Quick thanks to the band Wolfpack, whose excellent track Outro from the album Bullmilch opens and closes the show now. Give them a listen as they're totally rad. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode.